gospel, we find Jesus walking with his disciples. And they're arguing about something, I think it's pretty human. Who among them is the greatest? They're worried about status and about being first. And we've all been there. I mean, right? We want to know that what we are doing it well, that we're important, and that people notice. But, as usual, Jesus turns things upside down. One of the things that you should always look for when you're reading the Gospels, when you're reading the Bible as a whole, but particularly the Gospels, is what we call the great reversal, right? So this happens when people expect one thing to happen, or there's something that is the norm, and Jesus says, yeah, but no. And in the kingdom of God, it is this way. And so then Jesus teaches us a new way to think about things. He reverses our focus on our own selfish priorities in the fast-paced, performance-driven world to a paradigm of love and other-centeredness. And we see one of those great reversals here in the gospel today. The disciples are arguing about who is going to be the greatest, and Jesus sits them down and says, wait. No. Whoever wants to be first must be last and must be a servant of all. And I think it's important to note that they're arguing about who would be the greatest made them completely miss what Jesus was saying to them. He's walking around, walking with them, and he's talking about the future, what's going to happen, right? He's like, hey, in the coming days, I'm going to be betrayed, and then I'm going to be killed, and I'm going to rise again. And they totally miss this. I mean, this is the whole plot line, and they don't catch it because they're all, I'm going to be bigger than you are. No, it's me. I'm going to sit on the right hand. And, and I think that happens to us. We get so preoccupied with our own thing that we can miss the plot line. And when he asks them, what are you arguing about? They're silent. They don't even say anything. And so it's this total breakdown of communication. They're missing everything Jesus is doing because they're focused on themselves and the priority of being the greatest. And Jesus just says, no, that's not it. Don't try to be great. Serve others. Serve those who are weak and welcome the child. And you have to remember that children in Jesus' time, they were the least powerful members of society, right? They had no status, they had no authority, and yet Jesus lifts up this child as the symbol of greatness. He's telling his disciples and us that the true greatness is not about being on top, it's about service, it's about humility, it's about caring for those who are vulnerable. So this last week, we had the Saint Day of Hildegard. I don't know if you know Hildegard. If you don't, I highly recommend that you read about her. She's amazing. She was a 12th century theologian. She was a composer, opera composer, a healer, an artist, a mystic. She had a love and a focus on creation. So I thought that talking about her a little bit would just be perfect for today. So Hildegard had these spiritual visions for years. And her visions really shaped the way that she understood God and how she understood the world. But for years, she didn't share these visions. Decades. She did not tell anybody about the visions that she was having. She didn't really feel like she was worthy or she was qualified, and so she just kind of kept it all to herself. Didn't write it down, didn't tell anybody. And it's for a couple reasons. One, she was a nun, so she's a woman, again, in the 12th century, and so didn't necessarily think that people wanted to hear what she had to think. And her visions were a little different than a lot of the teachings of the time, right? So this was a time of feudalism, it was a time of the Crusades, so everything was about conquering, working the earth and taking over, the lands that are close to us. And that wasn't her vision. In contrast, her vision was she saw creation as this vibrant gift of God that spoke to us about who God was. One of her most powerful ideas was this is a Latin word that I will likely never say correctly or the same way, throughout this sermon, so we're going to give it a shot. Viriditas, which I should have just said greening, but I wanted to give it a shot. So one of our most powerful ideas was viriditas. It's a Latin word that means greening, or the life-giving power of God that flows through all of creation. Hildegard's viriditas saw it as this radiant, magnificent force. It's literally alive in every living thing. It's not just the green of the plants, it's the breath of life that animates the whole earth. It's the vitality that makes the trees grow, the rivers flow, and the air swirl around us. And it is God's creative energy pulsating through the universe. And I 100% believe this. It is a transformative belief about how God is alive among us. And I think it changes everything about how you see the world. So Hildegard wrote about how this divine energy touches everything, from the smallest plant to the largest mountain. She believed that when we are in harmony with creation, we're in tune with this powerful divine flow. But when we exploit or harm the earth, she wrote that we disrupt the balance and we interfere with the very life force that God is pouring out into the world. So Hildegard's visions were stunning in their depth. She didn't just see the world around us as an object to be used or controlled. She saw it as sacred, as a living, breathing reflection of God's creative love. And so if you get a chance this week, go look up some of her paintings. I'm reading this fabulous book by Matthew Fox. Peggy, I sent you a little clip from that. So Matthew Fox's book on the paintings of Hildegard, and he goes through, he looks at one of her paintings and then talks about it. And he quotes from her writings, and it's fabulous. So if you get a chance, go look up some of her paintings that sort of, again, are some of that great reversal. It changes the way we think about things. So in Hildegard's vision, creation itself is one of the least. She sees the earth as vulnerable and that it needs our care. And so in today's gospel, Jesus tells us that to be great, we must be humble servants. We must care for the least among us. So when we care for creation, we're not just doing something good. We're participating in God's ongoing act of creation. We're nurturing the viriditas that flows through everything. We're becoming part of the greening power of God. And that's why caring for the earth is not just something we do, but it's actually a sacred calling. It's part of our spiritual life. So last week we focused on the theme of do, right? We had that list of 20 things to go do for creation. 10 of the things were about seeing creation in this viriditas, and 10 were about doing something to protect creation. And I wanted just to, what did you see? What did you experience? What did you do off that list? So I tend to see through photographs. My family laughs at me because I always have my phone up and taking pictures of everything, because it's so much of how I experience the world around me. And one of the things I did is I took pictures of this great root structure. It was around a tree in my neighborhood. The root structure was incredibly complex, and it connected to a very large tree. Didn't encroach on the sidewalk, but meandered within the green space that was left for it, which, to be honest, was probably way too small. And it made me think about how that tree was being nourished by those roots and by all of the trees that were close by. It made me reflect on the connection of all things and how we flourish when we feel penned in. And so my question is, what did you do? What did you go see? I encourage you to share it with someone. When we share something positive we've done, two things happen. First, it makes us feel good, right? When we share our actions and accomplishments, it actually releases endorphins, and it boosts our mood by giving us this sense of fulfillment. It reinforces the good of what we've done, and it encourages us to keep going. So there's actually a physiological reason to share the good things that we're doing. It does boost us. Second, it can inspire someone else to act. In behavioral economics, we have this concept called nudge. which refers to small actions that can influence others' behaviors. One type of nudge is the power of social influence. And that is, when we hear what most people are doing something, we are more likely to do it too. I always think, when I teach my students this at USC, I always say, our middle school selves knew this, but we've done lots of research as academics to prove this. But for example, studies have shown that telling people that 98% of their neighbors are recycling makes it more likely to recycle themselves. And there are studies where they just put a sign up, 98% of your neighbors are recycling, and then you see the recycling go up in that neighborhood. It's peer pressure on a positive sense. So I encourage you to share what you did during the week of Do. You'll feel good about it, and you might nudge someone else to take action for creation, knowing that we're all in this together. And if you didn't get the chance to do it last week, don't worry. The list is still out in the back. I put more out there. Grab one and go try something. They're simple, they're little, it's easy. But take a little bit of time to really pay attention to the world around you this week. See the greening power of God and see the sacredness of creation. Because when we pay attention, something amazing happens. We start to see the world not as a backdrop to our lives, but as the living, breathing expression of God's love. And as you go about your week, remember that Veritas is the magnificent force of life. It's all around you. It is in the trees, it's in the flowers, the air, the water. It's in every living thing. And it's a reminder that God is not distant, but is present in this very fabric of the world. This week, our focus is on advocacy as our part of our season of creation. And advocacy is where we go beyond our personal responsibility and we join our voices with others to push for larger systematic changes. In advocacy, we work to get large organizations like the government, bless you and bless you, big corporations to change their behavior to protect the environment. And these larger entities, they have the capacity to move the needle in significant ways because of their size and because of their reach. And that's where advocacy comes in. You can be a part of advocacy by writing to your congressperson, by signing petitions, or joining interest groups that stand up for environmental causes. Abby mentioned a couple of these organizations the other week, like the Environmental Defense Fund, the Arbor Day Foundation. There are also advocacy groups that the Episcopal Church is a part of or has created. So if you go on our national website, the Episcopal website, you'll see all the different kinds of advocacy that we do, and we have some that are focused specifically on creation care. There's also, I wanted to bring to your attention, the Faith Action Network, that is also an Episcopal advocacy organization. And what I like about it is, if you go to their website, they list all of the bills and things that are coming up in the state of Washington that you might want to be aware of, right? So both, it has creation care, but it really has all those issues that attach to our baptismal covenant. And then it urges you the ways that you can act. So that's the Faith Action Network. So take a look and see if there's a way for you to get involved. And one form of advocacy that maybe we don't think about right away, but one that I just love and I wanted to talk about, is art advocacy. So art has this unique way of moving us. It moves us emotionally, stirs something in really deep within us that sometimes words or facts just can't reach. So I experienced this last summer. In 2023, I was traveling with the Epiphany Choir. We went all over the UK, and the choir, which is a spectacular choir, was singing Evensong. And one time, we should probably pick a date on the calendar, and let's all go take a field trip and go to Evensong in Seattle. It's just remarkable. But we were visiting all these different cathedrals in the UK, and they were singing Evensong. And one of our principal stops was in the Durham Cathedral. So if you've never been, the Durham Cathedral is stunning. It is an ancient Romanesque building. It stands on this hill. It's visible from everywhere in the entire city. You know, our hotel much to my body's dismay, was at the very bottom of the hill. But you would come out of the hotel and you would look up at the very long road, but you would see the cathedral on the very top of the hill. And it was just like this beacon to everybody. It'd be just gorgeous and beautiful. And then when you got inside the church, during evensong, we would sit in the choir stalls. So if you would imagine this church, it's enormous church, and then up at the very front is the altar, and then almost probably the size of our entire sanctuary would be the choir stalls. So there are these beautifully wood-carven chairs, like individual chairs, like a bench, but individual chairs with their own wood-carved walls on either side of you and your own little red cushion that you would sit on. And we were facing each other, so one side would be here, and we're looking at each other, and the choir would sit on both sides. And I was their chaplain, and so I got to sneak in. I was not allowed to sing, but I got to sit amongst them, and they sing, across the space to each other. It was just their voices would just swell and fill the entire space. And so after the choir stalls, then you would see all of the pews, and then the rest of the church in the back. And as we would sit there, there was this incredible art installation that was there while we were there, inside the church. So suspended inside the cathedral was this 25-foot illumined globe, and it displayed the imagery from NASA, showing the Earth as seen from space. And the images would move across the globe, and the globe slowly spun. As I sat there, and I was just surrounded by the beauty of this ancient architecture, listening to the incredible singing of the choir, I would just stare at our planet. And I felt really connected to the planet in kind of a different way. And it was one of those really moving experiences. And I was just filled with awe for creation, and filled with the real sense of responsibility that we have for it. Our world is so fragile, and it's such an amazing gift from God. We're called to protect it and to advocate for its care, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. And art can touch us in a way that compels us to act. And that's why art advocacy is so important. It stirs the heart, moves people in ways that other forms may not. So as we reflect on advocacy in our season of creation, I invite you to consider what moves you to act. Maybe it's writing letters or joining an organization. Maybe it's supporting artists who advocate for the planet through their work. Perhaps you are an artist, either a visual artist or a performing artist. How can you use your art? Maybe it's simply sharing your own personal actions with someone else and giving them a nudge to join in. Whatever it is, know that your voice, it matters. Just like the disciples struggled to understand Jesus' message, sometimes we struggle to know what difference our small actions can make. Jesus calls us to be simple, to welcome the least, and to serve rather than to seek greatness. When it comes to creation care, the simplicity, it's the key. It's not about grand gestures or saving the whole planet all at once. It's about the small, consistent acts of love and service. Picking up trash, planting a tree, sharing with someone what you have done. It's about using our voices together to advocate for policies that protect this fragile world, and it's about remembering that in doing so, we are not only welcoming the least of these, but Christ himself. So let us pray for the wisdom and the courage and the humility to live out this call to advocacy. Let us advocate for the planet in whatever way we can, knowing that our small actions, when combined with the voices of others, can make a profound difference. And let us remember that at the heart of it all is simplicity. And as Lynn told us the other week, God loves the earth, and we should not wreck it. May her words be our guide.